A significant portion of Protestants argue that the papacy today is nothing like the papacy of the Middle Ages. Today, the Pope is a kindly man, riding around in his Pope-mobile, caring about the poor and blessing the world. He even blessed 800 Harley-Davidson motorcycles in one day. So has the papacy truly reformed? If it has indeed changed its nature, how and when did the transformation occur? Protestants in the 16th century unanimously agreed that the papacy was the Antichrist of the Bible. They were either wrong then, right then, but wrong now, or right then and still right now. The papacy had reached the height of its power during the Middle Ages. At the approach of the 18th century, that power had been in decline for several hundred years. In February of 1798, by order of the French Revolutionary government, General Berthier entered Rome and overthrew the papal government. Pope Pius VI was taken captive and died in captivity the following year. Popes had been taken captive before, but this was different. For the first time in well over a millennium, the continent of Europe had reason to believe, and many did believe, that the papacy as a political institution was dead. The beast of Revelation 13 was identified as the papacy of the Middle Ages. A detail of the description of that beast is this: "And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death." The abolishment of the papacy by the forces of the French Revolution now marked off a clear 1260-year period from the time of the decree of Justinian and the official rise of papal power. You will recall that Bible prophecy uses the lunar calendar and equates each prophetic day for a year of real time. Thus 3.5 years, 42 months, or 1260 days would all indicate the same period of time. 7 times the Bible refers to this same period of persecution of the true church of God. The little horn of Daniel 7 wears out the saints for 3.5 years. The holy people are scattered in Daniel 12 for 3.5 years. The pure woman, or the true church of God, is forced to flee into the wilderness for 3.5 years. The holy city is trodden underfoot for 42 months. The beast of Revelation 13 wars against the saints for 42 months. The 2 witnesses of Revelation are clothed in sackcloth for 1260 days. Sackcloth is a symbol for mourning and humiliation. And again in Revelation 12, the woman fled to the wilderness for 1260 days. All of these represent the persecution of the true Christian church under the centuries of papal tyranny. Notice that the woman fleeing into the wilderness appears twice, once as 3.5 years and once as 1260 days, illustrating the correspondence of these time periods as one and the same. Why 7 times? The Catholic Church wants people to overlook this period of time. God apparently does not want people to forget it. He will not forget 50 to 100 million of his people who were murdered by those power-hungry religious impostors. From the union of church and state to the separation of church and state, 1260 years of religious totalitarianism brought to an end by the atheistic forces of the French Revolution. As one historian states, with the death of Pius VI in August 1799, and Napoleon's declared determination that no successor would be elected, it was believed almost universally that the papacy had come to its final and irreversible end. One correspondent wrote the obituary of the papacy. But it was not the end of the beast. The wound only looked deadly, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. In order to understand the great cover-up, you must understand the 1260 years of papal tyranny this world experienced after the fall of the Roman Empire. You must understand the wound that brought that tyranny to an end, the healing of that wound, and what happens when it is fully healed. When Napoleon dispatched his general to remove Pope Pius VI from office, he had no intention that he would ever be replaced. Yet only 3 years later there was a new pope. Napoleon himself permitted the Roman Catholic Church to be recognized as the majority religion, but not the state religion of France. The political power of the papacy was broken, and the clergy were required to swear an oath of allegiance to the state. In 1870, the Papal States, a tract of land over which the Pope had exercised sovereign control for centuries, was nationalized, and the papacy no longer had any claim whatever to earthly temporal rule. He was a king without a country. But in 1929, Benito Mussolini signed the Lateran Treaty with the papacy, who agreed to recognize the state of Italy with Rome as its capital. In return, the state of Italy recognized the Pope as sovereign head of a tiny tract of land in the city of Rome known as Vatican City. Why was this tiny piece of land so important to the papacy? For centuries it had claimed to be both the spiritual and temporal authority for the entire world. Thus the two keys in the Vatican's coat of arms. One represents its spiritual power, and the other its temporal power, ruling by divine appointment over every head of state of every country in the world. But how could the Pope claim temporal sovereignty over others with no sovereign claim of his own? Control of the Vatican returned to him that temporal power. He once again could be counted as an independent political head of state over a sovereign kingdom, all 109 acres of it. Was this the healing of the deadly wound? Not really. The healing of the wound is much bigger than that. It was, however, a small step along the way back to world dominance. It would be helpful to compare the three symbols of the Roman power that each had 10 horns. Each one focuses on a different time period. The 10-horned beast of Daniel 7 arises after Alexander's Greece and encompasses the entire history of the Roman power, which would last until the end of the world as we know it. Therefore, it included both pagan and papal Rome. The 10-horned beast of Revelation 13 arose at the time of the European kingdoms and lasted 1260 years, to the time of its deadly wound. Its emphasis is the reign of the papacy during that 1260-year period. The 10-horned beast of Revelation 17, ridden by the harlot, represents the final resurrection and manifestation of this Roman beast power at the very end of time, just prior to its final destruction. That leaves a little more than 200 years now, during which the wound to the medieval beast has been healing. During this time there has been no beast. Or has there? In Revelation 13:10, the deadly wound is described, "He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword." The very next verse says, "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon." All the beasts before it came out of the sea. In Bible prophecy, the seas and the waters are said to represent multitudes of people, established nations. But this beast comes from the earth, a relatively unpopulated place. It arises at the time of the deadly wound, toward the end of the 1700s. In contrast to the other carnivorous beasts, The horns of its power appeared to be based on principles of peacefulness, benevolence. There are no crowns. This power is not a despotic monarchy. Yet it would grow strong enough to speak with the power of a dragon. There is only one world power that could fit this description, the United States of America. It came from a new land, at the time of the deadly wound. Civil and religious liberty were the horns of its power, something none of the carnivorous beasts before it had ever made the foundation of their government. But notice what this innocent-looking beast does when it speaks like a dragon. And he exercises all the power of the first beast before him, and causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he deceives them that dwell on the earth, saying that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword, and did live. And he has power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. To summarize, at the time of the fall of the pagan Roman Empire, this beast received power and authority from this beast, which wielded it until it received a deadly wound and lost its power. Then this beast arose from the earth and grew until it was strong enough to speak like this beast, at which point it brought this beast back to life in a slightly different form. And he deceives them that dwell on the earth, saying that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live. The description of the resurrected beast is given using this symbol, which is essentially the beast with the deadly wound brought back to life. But the symbol goes into greater detail. The seven-headed beast represents the secular powers of earth, the kings, the rulers, the political powers, we might say. The woman who rides the beast is the papacy, the harlot. This detail of the woman riding the beast gives us the key to what the deadly wound really was and what it means for it to be healed. The Roman Catholic Church did not cease to exist with the deadly wound. A new pope was installed and the church was back in business. What made her look dead was that she had lost her control over the secular or civil powers, and therefore the ability to terrorize and persecute those who refused to accept her doctrines and authority. The power of church and state had been broken. This was the wound, and the Catholic Church has looked powerless ever since. This loss of power was not voluntary. It was forced upon her, so she has adopted the strategy of using that powerlessness to appear like a docile and humanitarian organization. You might say it put her on her best behavior. Of course, financial scandals and worldwide child sex abuse scandals, including thousands of so-called priests, give us an idea of what her best behavior is really like. In reality, this organization is a totalitarian political system that claims the right to rule the world on religious pretexts. And that includes the consciences of all men and women. Thus it has been for over 1,000 years. That has never changed, and she has never forgotten her ambition for world domination. The world has forgotten, and for that, the world will pay a price. Notice that I have dealt with historical realities that can be verified from public historical sources. I have made no reference to skeletons of babies inside the walls of Catholic convents, or the sacrifice of children in the basements of Catholic orphanages. I do not traffic in Roman Catholic urban legends. I am not anti-Catholic. I see the vast majority of them as decent people who live life like most of the rest of us, seeking a measure of security and satisfaction, caring for our families, trying to make ends meet, and hoping for a life to come. I enjoy being friends with them whenever possible, but I believe they are deceived. Their faith is hijacked by an illegitimate priesthood who stand between them and God and claim to have power over them physically and spiritually. The Catholic hierarchy claims that the Church never changes, but over the centuries they have initiated numerous rituals and doctrines to keep the people focused on and subservient to them as their spiritual masters. Some of these include prayers for the dead, veneration of angels, use of images in worship, daily Mass, exaltation of Mary, last rites, purgatory, prayers to Mary and the saints, worship of relics, canonization of dead saints, a celibate priesthood, the rosary, indulgences, transubstantiation, auricular confession, adoration of the wafer, total subservience to the Pope, necessity of the 7 sacraments, claim that church tradition is equal in authority to the Bible, apocryphal books added to the Bible, the Immaculate Conception of Mary, papal infallibility, and the glorious ascension of Mary into heaven. None of these things are taught in the Bible, and they have nothing to do with biblical or historical Christianity. I do not believe that those who are programmed to believe these things are evil for doing so, but I believe they are deceived, just as I believe that many of my friends and fellow Americans are now deceived concerning the condition of this country. There is a very real comparison here. The American government has strayed far from the document on which it claims to be founded, and the Roman Catholic Church has strayed far from the document on which it claims to be founded. Both have been engaged in massive cover-ups throughout most of their history. Both have been characterized by deception. Anyone who cannot see that at this point has something in common with a large African bird. One has been at it for over 200 years. It did not begin as the world's police force. Only in my lifetime has it really begun to speak like a dragon. The other one has been doing it for over 1,500 years, and it has now virtually succeeded in covering that reign of tyranny with the mask of pious sanctimony. That's why it is the greatest cover-up of all time. As we have seen, this beast is instrumental in turning this beast into this beast. Is there any tangible evidence that the United States has been slowly but steadily becoming a patron of Roman Catholicism? In 1867, Congress placed a ban on using federal money for any official mission to the Vatican. That was repealed by Ronald Reagan in 1983. A year later, William A. Wilson became the first American ambassador to the Vatican. Ken Hackett is the current ambassador. The United States government is divided into 3 branches: the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. 50 members of the 2013 United States Congress received training at Jesuit institutions, just under 10%. In 1985, there was 1 Catholic Supreme Court justice. Now there are 6, a 2/3 majority. That leaves the executive branch.
When you look into Benedict XVI's eyes, what do you see? God.
When 3 American presidents knelt before the corpse of Pope John Paul II, it was the first time an American president had ever attended the funeral of a pope. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Think a relationship that intimate could never develop between the Vatican and the United States government? Think again. But wait, we need to stop right here, because this is where the past meets the future. As some would say, where the rubber meets the road.